The Grand Hall of Velasasora was the sort of place that made lesser beings feel very small, very quickly. Its ceilings stretched so high that local weather patterns had to be monitored hourly, and its walls shimmered like molten glass caught in a perpetual sunset. Ancient banners woven from fibers that could slice bone hung in stiff solemnity from pillars that pulsed faintly with an internal light, as if the building itself was breathing, watching, waiting. Beneath it all, the surviving delegates of two very exhausted civilizations stood in fidgeting silence. The war had ended, technically, but no one quite knew what to do with themselves now that shooting each other was no longer encouraged. The humans, a mixed collection of diplomats, generals, and one maintenance technician who had taken a wrong turn near the restroom and somehow ended up part of the negotiating team, stared across the polished obsidian floor at their counterparts. The Saravan. Tall, lean figures with luminous white skin, long tapering ears that twitched at every micro-shift of sound, and eyes that seemed to flicker with internal starlight. If humans were practical creatures molded by gravity and bad luck, the Saravan looked like they'd been sketched by a particularly sentimental nebula. At the center of it all sat Queen Avalrian, poised on a throne that seemed less built than summoned from the raw fabric of reality itself. Her black hair spilled over gleaming armor, the color of deep space, her long fingers resting lightly on the arms of her seat. She surveyed the assembled throng with a regal boredom that suggested she had far better things to do, like cataloging her extensive shoe collection, or perhaps conquering another star system. An aide, whose job mostly consisted of looking nervous and not passing out, stepped forward with a scroll so heavy it required a small anti-gravity unit to hover beside him. He unrolled it with a flourish that was only slightly ruined by the scroll bumping into his head. "Her Majesty," he intoned, "wishes to make her final request for the conclusion of hostilities." The hall held its collective breath. One could almost hear the sound of nervous sweating. Queen Avalrienne rose, her every movement a calculated symphony of menace and allure. She let the moment stretch, an artist savoring the blank canvas, before finally speaking. "I will have," she said, her voice soft as velvet over a blade, "a human." There was a long silence. Somewhere near the back, a human diplomat let out a tiny involuntary squeak. "I beg your pardon, Your Majesty?" The chief human ambassador, a man who had once negotiated a trade agreement while being actively shot at, managed to stammer. "A human," she repeated, with the serene patience of someone explaining gravity to a particularly stubborn brick. "As my reward." Murmurs swept through the Saravane court like wildfire. A few advisors exchanged horrified glances. One elderly counselor appeared ready to have a very dignified heart attack. Even among a species that once considered raising volcanoes as art installations, this was considered odd. The humans, meanwhile, scrambled to interpret. Was this symbolic? A hostage? An offering? An intergalactic exchange student program gone horribly wrong? "Perhaps," offered one of the Saravane liaisons delicately, "Her Majesty intends to study the human." "Study," muttered the human ambassador under his breath. "That's what the scientists said before they dissected that poor Vornax beast." Queen Avalrienne arched an eyebrow, the expression somehow managing to convey centuries of exasperated imperial majesty. "Do you intend to question the generosity of my terms?" she asked. The humans wisely decided they did not. After a hurried and frankly unprofessional game of rock, paper, scissors behind a column, Corin Halstead found himself reluctantly volunteered. It was the universe's way of rewarding his lifelong dedication to avoiding responsibility. Dressed in a slightly stained maintenance uniform and still holding a half-eaten protein bar, Corin was ushered forward. He gave the Queen a weak smile and a wobbly bow that might have been more convincing if he hadn't tripped on his own foot halfway through. To everyone's astonishment, the Queen smiled. Not the grim, terrifying kind of smile the Saravane usually reserved for enemies about to be atomized, but an almost amused curl of her lips, as if someone had told her an inside joke about the entire galaxy, and only she got it. "This one will do," she declared. And just like that, the peace accords were signed. Later, as Corn was bundled into an elegant anti-gravity carriage that smelled faintly of alien spices and terror, He had just enough time to reflect on the situation. So, he muttered to himself, this is either the start of a diplomatic fairy tale or a horror story. Odds are about 50-50. His guard, a towering Saravane female who looked like she could bench press a hover tank, snorted in what might have been agreement or indigestion. It was hard to tell with aliens. The palace of Queen Avelrienne loomed ahead, a structure of flowing silver and iridescent stone that defied gravity and probably common sense. Drones shaped like mechanical dragonflies flitted through the air, and gardens bloomed with plants that cheerfully ignored the usual laws of biology by glowing, singing, and occasionally snapping at passers-by. Corin tightened his grip on the protein bar. It was stale, slightly melted, and his only weapon against the absurdity of the universe. At the gates, a herald wearing a cape so long it required two assistants to carry it announced, "The human has arrived." There was an audible clang as a nearby statue fell over in apparent shock. Inside, the queen awaited, sitting casually on a dais scattered with cushions that changed colors according to her mood. Currently a shade somewhere between mischievous pink and mildly plotting violet. "You," she said, pointing at Corin with a gloved finger, "are going to be fascinating." Corin, thinking that fascinating was not typically how you wanted to be described by someone who might own a dungeon for casual leisure, gave a nervous chuckle. Great. Do I get dental coverage?" There was a pause. Then, astonishingly, the queen laughed, a clear, bright sound that bounced off the high ceilings and left the courtiers blinking in confusion. Maybe, Corin thought, clutching his hopelessly inadequate protein bar and stepping forward into the glittering madness of alien politics, he had a fighting chance after all, or at least a good running start. Corin Halstead quickly discovered that being the queen's reward came with a number of unanticipated job responsibilities. First, there was the matter of etiquette training. This was conducted by a Saravane instructor named Velna, whose entire personality seemed to have been chiseled from a single, immovable slab of disapproval. Velna's ears flicked in subtle annoyance with every error Corin made, which meant they were practically vibrating the entire time. "You must," she instructed, "execute the third reverence bow when entering the queen's presence. It begins with a half kneel, followed by a flourish of the left hand, and concludes with an exhalation that precisely mimics the sound of a Kreloth in mating season." Corin blinked. "And what exactly does a Kreloth sound like?" Velna demonstrated. It was somewhere between a mournful foghorn and a melodramatic cow. Corin, who had once been told by a roommate he snored like a dying blender, gave it his best shot. The resulting noise was so pitiful that even the crystal pillars of the palace seemed to hum disapprovingly. Velna marked something on her data slate, presumably under the column labeled Lost Causes. Meanwhile, Queen Avelrienne seemed to take a personal interest in Corin's daily lessons. She would appear unexpectedly during his training sessions, leaning casually against ornate doorframes or sipping a vivid blue drink that smelled faintly of battery acid and mint. Watching, smirking. "You are adapting better than expected," she commented one afternoon, after Corin managed to perform a bow without spraining anything vital. "Some of our finest ambassadors never mastered the Kreloth exhale. Must be my extensive background in disappointing authority figures," Corin said brightly. The queen's laugh was sharper than before. Edge was something like approval, or maybe amusement at his inevitable doom. It was hard to tell. When he wasn't humiliating himself, Corin was dragged along to court events, which were dazzling affairs full of politics, danger, and snacks that were either delicious or slightly venomous, depending on the color coding. The queen paraded him around like a particularly amusing pet, introducing him to delegates from star systems he'd only heard of in speculative horror movies. "This is the human," she would say, with a smile that suggested Corin was about to either save the galaxy or accidentally set it on fire. "His name is Corin Halstead. He is unique." It became a courtly sport to ask Corin absurd questions. Did all humans really wear socks on their feet? Could humans truly not photosynthesize? Was it true that humanity once nearly wiped itself out over a beverage made from bean water? Corin answered every question with a straight face and increasingly outrageous fabrications. "Actually, he confided to a curious ambassador one evening. Bean water is sacred on Earth. Wars were fought, dynasties toppled. There's a whole ancient rite where we burn incense and chant to the great barista in the sky. Word of this great barista spread through the palace in less than a day. A week later, a minor noble presented the queen with a hand-stitched ceremonial coffee bean cloak as a diplomatic gift. Corin lived in daily terror that the lie would be discovered, but Avelrienne only smiled and said nothing. Beneath the glittering absurdity, however, there was an undercurrent of something else, something serious. The queen spent long hours in parts of the palace forbidden to everyone else. Corin glimpsed it once, a hidden corridor where the walls pulsed with a soft, ancient light, and the air smelled metallic, like the memory of thunderstorms. He had almost convinced himself it was his imagination, when one evening, after a particularly excruciating banquet, highlighted by a musical number performed by vibrating plants, Avelrienne summoned him privately. She wore a robe of midnight silver, her long ears twitching slightly in what Corin had come to recognize as restlessness. There was no audience, no courtiers, no drones, just the queen and the human. "You are wondering why I chose you," she said, voice low, almost conspiratorial. Corin shifted awkwardly. The thought might have crossed my mind, once or twice, maybe hourly. She paced, the hem of her robe whispering against the floor. "I require assistance, of a nature uniquely suited to you." Corin felt a flicker of hope. "You need your computer fixed. I'm great with clogged filters and rerouting power grids." The queen gave him a look that suggested her expectations were both higher and significantly more alarming. "I seek something ancient," she said, "something hidden beneath the foundations of Sora itself, a relic left by the precursors." Corin frowned. Precursors? Like the legendary ancient civilization that may or may not have existed? "Not a legend," she said, "a truth buried beneath millennia of politics and fear. The Saravane were not always the masters of this world. We were shaped, guided, as were your people." Corin let that sink in. Somewhere, deep in his brain, an entire library of bad science fiction movies flickered and shuddered. "You think humans and Saravane have a common origin?" he asked. She gave him a look that made him feel like a particularly dim lab rat. "I know it," she said, "and I believe you, Corin Halstead, possess the biological resonance required to unlock the gates they left behind." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Okay," he managed finally, "but just so we're clear, does this unlocking involve anything gross? Like blood sacrifices? Tentacles?" "No," she said, and then added thoughtfully, "Well, probably not." It was not the reassurance he had hoped for. Avelrienne smiled, sharp and satisfied. "You will assist me. In exchange, I will ensure you are not devoured by the political wolves currently stalking my court." "Devoured," Corin echoed. "Wonderful. Excellent. Just how I always dreamed of spending my weekends." But even as he joked, something inside him stirred. Curiosity, excitement, the same reckless spark that had gotten him into this mess to begin with. And somewhere deep beneath the palace, the ancient lock stirred as well, sensing perhaps that a long-awaited moment was finally drawing near. The day Corin Halstead finally stood before the ancient vault was not the day he expected. He had imagined a great battle, weapons clashing, maybe a few thousand sparks flying for dramatic effect. Instead, there he was, holding a flashlight that flickered intermittently, standing in a forgotten chamber deep under Sora. The air smelled faintly of old metal and something that could only be described as gently charred dust. The soft glow of ancient glyphs pulsed on the walls, bathing the room in an eerie, otherworldly light that made everything feel far older than it had any right to be. Avelrienne, however, seemed entirely at ease in this decaying corner of history, her black armor shimmering despite the low light. Her long ears flicked with impatience as she paced in front of a massive door, its surface covered in intricate carvings that hummed in the subtle frequency of long-forgotten power. The door was ancient, perhaps even older than the Saravane Empire itself, and it stood there, waiting to be unlocked. "Are you sure this will work?" Corin asked, feeling absurdly small as he clutched the flashlight in one hand and the strange crystal fragment Avalrienne had entrusted to him in the other. Avalrienne turned her piercing gaze toward him. "Do you doubt your own abilities, Corin Halstead?" Corin blinked. "You're the one who keeps calling me special. I'm just here to press buttons and look confused." The Queen gave a small, amused chuckle, the first genuine laugh he'd heard from her in what felt like ages. It was still sharp, but warmer than before. "You misunderstand. I chose you because of something beyond your capabilities and technology. It's your curiosity, your willingness to embrace the unknown, that more than anything will open this door." Corin stared at the glowing symbols. He'd been a maintenance worker for most of his life, someone who fixed things but never quite understood how they worked. He'd always assumed the galaxy was full of experts, people who understood the machinery of the universe, while he just patched up leaks. But here, standing at the brink of discovery, he realized that he was part of the universe's design in ways he could never have imagined. "Right," he muttered, taking a deep breath. "No pressure, then." Avalrienne stepped aside, letting him approach the door. The crystal fragment in his hand pulsed once, twice, resonating with the strange energy of the vault. His fingers shook as he placed it into a keyhole at the center of the door, and for a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low, rumbling hum, the door began to shift. It groaned like an ancient beast awakening from slumber, its carvings flashing with bright, fiery light as it slid open. Corin stumbled back, blinking against the sudden brightness. Beyond the door, the vault revealed itself, an immense hollow space filled with shimmering data crystals, long dormant machines, and memories. Entire archives of knowledge that had been sealed away long before the Saravane ever set foot on Velisora. The truth lay there, in the faint, shifting light. Humanity and Saravane were not different species, as they had been led to believe, but branches of the same ancient tree split by time, politics, and fear. Their ancestors, the mysterious precursors, had seeded the galaxy with life, guiding it with technology and wisdom beyond comprehension. Corin swallowed hard. This is what you wanted all along." Avalrienne's expression softened. "Yes, the history of our people, of your people, is written here. The secrets of the galaxy, unlocked by the simplest of keys, a human." Corin felt his heart race as he understood the weight of what he had just unlocked. It wasn't just knowledge, it was power. The power to rewrite history, to reshape the future. "Does this mean—" He hesitated, his mind whirling. "Does this mean the war was pointless?" Avalrienne sighed, the sound almost wistful. "Wars are never pointless, Corin. They teach us things. They change us. But they also distract us from what truly matters. This knowledge, it's the future. It's a chance to rebuild what was broken." And then, as if on cue, the peaceful stillness of the vault was shattered by the sound of footsteps. Not from the Saravane elite who had followed them down here, nor from the humans who had been waiting in the palace above. No, these were the footsteps of something far more dangerous. The very court members who had sought to manipulate the Queen, to claim the knowledge of the vault for themselves. They entered, led by a familiar face. Rylus, a noble who had once been an ally, now turned traitor. His eyes glinted with greed, and his fingers twitched near the hilt of his blade. "So," he said, his voice dripping with malice, "the little human has unlocked the vault. How convenient." Corin, ever the skeptic, had seen this coming. He glanced at Avalrienne. She was no longer the regal, untouchable monarch she had once been. She was something more, a leader, a partner. He gave her a small, knowing nod. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" he said, straightening. "You'd open the door and just take the galaxy's secrets for yourself?" Rylus's expression flickered, but he quickly masked it with arrogance. "The secrets belong to whoever is strong enough to claim them. And that's why we've come, human." Avalrienne stepped forward, her voice suddenly commanding. "You misunderstand, Rylus. The secrets are not for the taking. They are for all of us. Humanity, Saravane, and all who choose to stand together." She raised her hand, and the vault's ancient technology hummed to life again, its power surging like a living entity. The traders faltered, clearly unsure how to respond to the unexpected force. Corin took a deep breath. "And you don't want to mess with that," he added, a cheeky grin returning to his face. "Trust me, it's really not a good idea." The power in the room surged, and with a blast of light, the traders were knocked back by the force of the vault's activation. Rylus and his cronies scrambled, but the Queen and Corin were already one step ahead. The ancient knowledge once hidden in the vault was now available to the entire galaxy, but it would not be controlled by any one faction. Later, as they returned to the surface of Velus's Sora, the dawn breaking across the horizon, Corin couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. "So," he said, "what happens now? Do we send out a galaxy-wide invitation to come join the club? No more wars, just everyone sharing recipes and ancient wisdom?" Avalrienne smiled, a real smile this time. "Perhaps not everyone," she said, her voice light. "But we begin, Corin. We begin anew." And as the sun rose over the world that had once been the cradle of conflict, Corin realized that he had not just discovered a galaxy-altering secret. He had found a new family, a new purpose, and a chance to write the future alongside a queen who, despite her alienness, had become more human than he ever could have imagined. For the first time in his life, Corin Halstead felt like he truly belonged in the galaxy. And the galaxy, in turn, seemed a little less mysterious and a lot more exciting than it ever had before.